Hello. Today on How to Be a Human Being, we're talking about listening to our intuition with Tehilla. Tehilla works with women in Israel to change their lives and businesses. We had an excellent conversation about having a positive attitude and letting that lead to building trust in your own intuition. You can find Tehilla at www.bioforbiz.com. Let's get to the episode.
My name is Tehilla Aloni. I'm an extrasensory business consultant, a homeopath, and the CEO of an access control company. I used to be the national judo champion of Israel for about 7 years when I was younger, and later I became a boot camp commander in the IDF, the Israeli army.
That is a very interesting life. I have a couple questions for you. We met initially over Reddit, and what interested me in talking to you was your story about judo. So I kind of want to start with that. How did you start getting into judo?
Well, when I was 4, I had a neighbor which was 1 year older than me. She was in judo, and she basically used to beat me up. So I wanted my mom to send me to judo, but my mom said that until I don't start school, then I'd have to wait. So I waited a whole year till I was old enough, and then I started doing judo at the age of 5.5.
5.5. So how long did you do judo for?
From the age of 5 till after I was 18. I was also I think when I was, if I remember correctly, about the age of 11 or 12, I made the national team, and then I started my serious training once I also joined the national Israeli team.
So joining a national team like that's got to be a huge time commitment.
Yeah, definitely. At the time when I joined, I was extremely ambitious when I was young. And at the time, I wasn't aware of the perks, which were flying abroad to training camps and competitions. And that was amazing. I really enjoyed the social side of it. And I must say that I didn't enjoy training. Training was very hard. And also, judo also involves weight categories. So you always have to be watching your diet. And there was some point where I had to lose 8 kilos. I don't know how much that is in pounds, but I think it's about 16 pounds. I used to lose, during 3 weeks, I used to lose 8 pounds. And then the last week, I had to lose the remaining 8 pounds. So I just, I didn't eat, and I hardly drank anything. And that's just the way it was, because you were always encouraged to participate in the weight category, which was below your natural weight. So it was very, very difficult and very demanding. And I only continued because it was part of my identity. I enjoyed winning, and I enjoyed the social side. But most of the time, I must admit that I suffered quite a lot.
Yeah, I know here in the US, that's how a lot of young men, when they wrestle, they'll, be encouraged to drop 5-10 pounds to get down to that next category, and then they'll put a bunch of weight back on right before the match. They'll drink a bunch of water, start eating a bunch of food right after they weigh in.
I was focusing more on making the weight than on the competition. I used to fly, and I wasn't unusual in that respect. Most of the team was that way. So we used to focus on making the weight. We used to starve ourselves. I remember running in hotel corridors, wearing layers upon layers of warm clothes and plastic bags in order to sweat and lose weight, in liquid. And then I was just thinking about the hotel breakfast after I weighed in, and after I used to stuff myself with the hotel breakfast, and the last thing I wanted to do afterwards was compete.
So what was the main thing that motivated you to keep going? I mean, 7 years as a judo champion, that's a long time to be at the top of a sport.
Yeah, I think it was, first of all, I was young. I didn't have much of, I didn't have a lot of experience in life in general, and judo was what defined me. And I enjoyed, flying abroad. It was part of my identity. It made me special. I used to get, I missed school in order to be in a training camp in different places in the world, which was amazing. So I really enjoyed that. And I think it was a very important part of my development, because it made me very resilient, and it gave me a very strong sense of discipline and a strong sense of accomplishment. And I think it was great, but it was good for the first stage of my life. Later on, I moved on to different stages. I see it as one of the the first most important stages of my development. And also, I think it's very important to keep in mind that especially in individual sports, athletes are, especially, I can just say about myself, are very self-centered and egotistical because it's always about how I'm going to win, how I'm going to become the best. And it's also a zero-sum game. You're always fighting against someone else for your place.
So you said something there that, it built resilience and discipline for you. Kind of moving on through the rest of your life, how can you see that resilience and discipline show up in different parts of your life?
That's a very good question. I learned to trust myself. I knew that if I made a decision, I would stick to it no matter what. So if I decided I was going to lose those 16 pounds in a month, I will do that. Regardless of what it took, I would meet my goals. So that's a very specific kind of discipline. And I think it was good for that stage. But later on, as I moved on in life, when I became a boot camp trainer for new recruits, which is something that requires you to be completely selfless and in a thankless job, actually made the flip from being someone who's very self-centered and selfish into someone who completely gives themselves for someone else, which is basically the new recruits. Again, I had to be extremely self-disciplined, and I also had to apply the discipline to the soldiers. I was basically the bad guy. So that's the next stage. But as I grew, and I think that's one of the things I want to talk about today, as I grew, I learned that there has to be a very fine balance in discipline. Discipline has to be, I learned the importance of what I call soft discipline, which means that you're disciplined and you know that if you want to be complete, that if you make a decision with your mind, you know that you can follow up if you want to on that decision and it will happen. However, the importance of soft discipline, I think, and a higher awareness is that you're also willing to listen and be soft. First of all, toward yourself. If one time I decided that my training regime would be waking up every day at 5 o'clock in the morning and training, I later on learned to listen to myself and respect myself. And if I felt that I needed more sleep, I would respect that and not train that day. And that took a lot for me to realize the importance and value of a soft discipline that actually also makes room for flexibility. I think you can only apply that sort of soft discipline once you know that if you have to be, I'd call it in the maybe the hard discipline. I can't think of a better way to coin the phrase. If you know that you can be 100% disciplined, if you decide to be.
Maybe I can put it in a way it's a little bit different. The hard discipline is almost forcing yourself to go do the thing that you know you should do.
Exactly.
And then the soft discipline is realizing that sometimes your body can't handle the hard discipline every single day. Sometimes it needs a little bit of extra rest, or it needs maybe a little bit of extra calories for that day.
Exactly. I'd say the soft discipline is a much more gentle approach where you respect not only your body, but you respect you respect deeper needs. It's if in the hard discipline I used to completely disregard my physical needs and it was completely mind over matter, etc. With the soft discipline, I learned to respect and I made room for an inner voice, a new inner voice that I saw. Maybe if I didn't feel well and I let myself rest and I wouldn't tidy up or clean the house. So if I were coming from the hard discipline point of view, I think that I would, I might consider myself lazy. But if I listened to that voice, I saw that if I gave myself 2 hours of rest, I cleaned the house or did chores that I needed to do from a completely different place. I did them it was much easier for me to do it. I didn't have to force myself. It's almost like the soft discipline, I invited myself to do things. And I also respected myself.
Yeah, listening to both sides, that mental hardness or maybe easiness, and that physical hardness or maybe easiness.
In sports, it's very clear. But as I grew older and life became much more complicated, because sports and competition, everything is very, very black and white. Either you're a winner or you're a loser. But you learn, as more you grow up, you learn the different shades of gray. The more I made room for this inner voice within myself, then that's how my intuition grew. That inner voice made room for my intuition. And that's how I started developing my extrasensory abilities, from that softness. It didn't come from the hardness and the strictness that I used to apply to myself. It actually came from a place that, for me, it was very unexpected, because I grew up with the belief that in order to achieve your goals, you had to set out your goals, you had to be very focused and very determined. But it's a less flexible attitude, and I learned the power of flexibility as I grew up.
So what do you think happened in your life to make that shift from the hard discipline to having more respect for your body and making a room for an inner voice?
Well, first of all, my body has its limits, and I had to quit judo because I injured my knee twice. So much you can push yourself so much until something breaks, either mentally or physically. I think the beauty of reality, in a way, is that if you're not doing things correctly, then life sort of gives you feedback, and you feel the pain when you're not doing things correctly. So pain is a very good teacher. So the more I concentrated on my happiness and how to be happy, and I studied lots of spiritual studies and Kabbalah, the Jewish spiritual studies, then I learned to be softer. And reality, like I say, reality is the best teacher. If you just learn how to read the signs.
You said something that I love, and that's, if you're not doing things correctly, life gives you feedback. What kind of feedback has life given you? How can you interpret that feedback and change the things about your life you're not doing correctly?
But that's an excellent question. I can say I can either answer that in the macro or the micro. But I think the macro, actually, I think, is more difficult to interpret, because sometimes things can happen to us, like we can have a crisis and we think it's the worst thing at the time, but it leads to a huge growth and change. Like we might be fired from a job that we really like, and then it forces us to start our own business, which is actually following our dreams, and being fired, what seemed at the time as being a very bad thing, being fired was actually the best thing that happened to us. Maybe on a macro level, I think maybe it's more difficult to talk about that, but I think on a micro level, on a day-to-day basis, I think as a mother, I think my children provide the best feedback. My state of mind, or the way I'm behaving, I can see it straight away on my children. So I don't think you have to go very far to look for this feedback. I think you can get this feedback, at every given moment. It's also in how you personally feel about yourself, and how the people around you, which are for you, I say the people you love and that that love you, react to you.
So this is sitting really, really well with me. I absolutely love this topic, especially on the micro level. An example I have is food. If you're not eating correctly, your body will give you the feedback to say, hey, maybe because I got a stomach ache after I ate all that sugary garbage food, maybe that's my body telling me something. Is that kind of on the same line?
Definitely. That's a great example.
Do you have any more examples maybe that you've seen in your own life?
I work with people all the time. And at the end of the day, life is about marketing. You can market from the way you market to your children. We're going to have a lovely day today, and come, let's get into the car, so you'll have a great day. To the way you present things to other people. Now, marketing is also about the way how you believe things are. It's about perspective. If you present, for example, in homeopathy, part of the healing process sometimes includes a return of old symptoms, meaning that if someone used to suffer, for example, from tonsillitis or throat pain when they were young, part of the healing process is that they might get the throat pain might come back when they're older, as part of the healing process. So if you, it's all a matter of how you present it to them. You can tell them, I'm so sorry that your throat is sore. Let's see how we can do it. Let's see what I can give you to help you with your throat. Or I can tell them, listen, this is a really good sign. It means that you're taking a good remedy, and that part of the healing process is that things that weren't resolved properly when you were younger are coming up again to be resolved, whether it's physical or mental symptoms. And once you present it to them in that way, they're much more accepting. I think in general, life, if I were to think about a formula for personal evolution, I'd say that it's time multiplied by pain divided by your resistance. It's pain multiplied by the time you spend in that painful zone, I'd call it, divided by your resistance. So the more you resist to a process that you're going through, the less you involve, and the more painful it is. But once you know and you agree that the fact that now you're suffering from this throat ache, but it's coming up now in order to be resolved, then it's, first of all, you suffer much less, and also you evolve much faster through the process. And the same is also when I'd say we market or interpret the reality for ourselves. I can see something and I can say, oh, this is the worst thing that has happened to me. Oh, or I can say, okay, this is a great opportunity that has happened for me in order to grow.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned one earlier that, losing your job can be one of those things that can be either seen in a negative way or a positive way. That this could be a really bad thing for my family. I won't be able to pay my bills. I won't be able to live in this house. Or it can be a good thing of, wow, look at this time that I have. I have all this time. I can go start my business and follow my dreams.
Exactly. It's all, it's a cliche, but it's so true. It's all a matter of perspective. And perspective is also, you train, I think one can train, oneself to have a positive perspective. The more you train and work on having a positive perspective, it already is part of you. You don't have to work hard for it. It's just the way you interpret reality and the things that happen to you.
How can we use that saying, life is all about marketing, to help train our intuition?
I think, first of all, life is all about marketing. At the end of the day, is how you sell reality to yourself. Look, marketing sounds, in a way, it can sound negative in a way, because you're thinking marketing, and usually, marketing in many cases, it presents a false idea about a certain product. So I'm not sure that life is all about marketing has the best connotation for most people. But I do think it's important that one makes a conscious effort to paint things or occurrences in a positive way. Now, when I say positive, I don't mean that you have to ignore the pain, or you have to ignore negative feelings that come up. Okay, because if you ignore that, that's already suppressing your feelings, and that's actually something that I don't think is very good. But it's acknowledging negative feelings and acknowledging something that might come up that is uncomfortable or inconvenient, like I say, like losing your job, but knowing that there is a higher purpose for that, and that it can be an opportunity, if you choose to use it, for something much greater than where you are today. And from that place, once you reach that place, so in general, I think you're in a much calmer and clearer state of mind. And from there, you can hear your intuition.
And how do you follow that intuition?
That's an excellent question. And I think what the way I started out was that I used to listen to or give room to my intuition when it was in making decisions that were unimportant. So it's like, like a child, that when you encourage them to answer questions, they become more and more confident, and then they give more and more answers. So the same thing was, I used to like walk in the woods, and then I would say, do I want to go left or right? And I used to just go where I wanted to. I didn't try to rationalize, I used to turn left just because I wanted to turn left. I didn't try to rationalize why I turned left. I didn't say, okay, I'll turn left or right. Just the first inclination that came up, I followed on it. So it started by making, I'd say, meaningless decisions. And the more I respected that inner voice, just the first, I'd say maybe even impulsive choice that came to mind in in things that were meaningless, the louder it became where things had more meaning. And like I had to, when I met people, I had a gut feeling about someone. And the less I try to rationalize why I don't want to meet with this person and convince myself that I should meet with someone, for instance, or I should do this. And I just, did things because it felt right, or didn't do something because it felt wrong. That's when my intuition grew louder and louder, because I gave it more and more place, and I gave it more respect. And so gradually I involved my intuition in decisions that were with higher and higher importance. But it started off with the little things, with the meaningless things, so to speak.
So kind of what I hear you saying, and it's not exactly what you said, but starting off with things that are small and insignificant is a good way to learn how to trust your intuition.
Exactly. Practice and training. Everything's a learning curve in life. So you want to practice and train with the things that in the beginning, with things that are insignificant and meaningless. And later on, you take on the bigger things. But I think it's also very important to respect your gut feelings. I used to work, one of the things I did was I used to work for El Al Security, that's the airline security. And one of the things that they say is that even if you questioning someone, and you suspect, you don't know why you suspect them, but you suspect them, you just got a gut feeling that this person is a suspect, then that's good enough for them. You're supposed to report that person, and then they'll take more stronger steps to check him out. And one of the things that they also taught was that if you were inexperienced, the chances are that you might find someone suspect based on a gut feeling. There are more chances that you find someone suspect based on a gut feeling, and the more experienced you are, you'll be able to put your finger exactly on why that person is suspect. So that also showed me that intuition is something that it's also subconsciously we know how to see the signs. I remember speaking to a diamond dealer, and he said, the first thing I look at when I come to buy a diamond is not the diamond, I look at the person who's selling it. So I think we're all keyed to these social skills, and to gut feelings and making intuitive decisions when it comes to other people and in general. It's just how much you respect what you feel, and don't try to always rationalize it.
Yeah, I love that. That feeling can be a sometimes better way to go about living life than overanalyzing everything and taking everything and by face value and just saying, okay, here's the numbers. Does it make sense? But is there anywhere in life where you should just not listen to your gut?
I think there are many places where it's difficult to differentiate where the inner voice is coming from. Okay. There actually, sometimes you might think that you're listening to your gut feeling when you want to, just slam the door and get out of, a situation that you're uncomfortable with. And you're like, yes, of course, I'm following my gut feeling. My gut feeling told me I wanted, to slam the door and to cut all ties with that person. But it's not necessary. You have to know. That's where the brain comes in. You can't be all emotions and all heart. The brain always has to see. I think you have to use the brain as a way to understand where things are coming from, because we can imagine that something is coming from our intuition. Like if someone's phobic or they're constantly afraid of something, for instance, they keep on thinking that someone's going to break into their house. They're afraid of burglars, and they might attribute that to their gut feeling or their intuition, but it's not their intuition. It's their fear. So I think that's why I said that you have to that you first use your intuition with insignificant decisions, because the more you grow, what I think is what I use spiritual principles that I've learned with my brain in order to evaluate the feelings or the emotions that come up. And then it's easier for me to determine whether it's really an intuitive decision that I'm making, or it's a decision that's made out of an emotion which is a negative emotion.
So those emotions might be like anger or malice or lust or kind of those negative emotions. Probably think twice before you act on that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think if you it has to be. It's very tricky. If it were easy, it wouldn't be. Part of life is learning to differentiate where things are coming from, where your desires are coming, whether they're coming from a place that's base and low or from a higher place. So I think it's like what Kabbalah speaks about. Jewish Kabbalah it talks about there's lights and there are vessels, and the light is something that we can't control, that comes from the infinite, and we are vessels, and the purer the vessel is, the more it can actually bring through it light. It's like a radio. So if you remember those old radios where you had that knob and you kind of moved the knob, and when it was on the right station, then you could hear clearly. But as soon as you move the knob a bit to the left or to the right, you'd hear static or background noise, and you wouldn't hear clearly. So I think, and also it also depends on how good your radio was. So I think that life is all about basically working on your vessel, on making your vessel, the purer your vessel, the more you're able to receive and connect to something that's higher than you and act upon that.
I have a similar analogy with a glass window. You might have curtains in front of the window. It still lets some light in, but when you open up those curtains, you see clearly, and then you see, oh, there's a little bit of dust on my window. So you go out and clean the window, and now you're really seeing, you're getting the full effect of the light through that window.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
I have loved this conversation. Before we finish up here, is there anything else you want to chat about?
I think we covered quite a bit. I think the world would be a better place if everyone would focus on basically purifying their own vessel and being able to, so they could bring light to the world than on other things.
Where can people find you?
I have a website. It's called bioforbiz.com. That's my website. I also have a LinkedIn, Tehilla Aloni. Ideally, what I love to do is take a woman who owns a small business, help her with the extrasensory business consultancy, and also give a homeopathic remedy. Because what a homeopathic remedy does, it helps people break patterns. Because life is always, I see people keep on repeating the same pattern. It's just, with a different setting. And a part of growing is growing above these patterns. And that's what I love to do. I love to see women go through these changes and overcome patterns that have been with them for a lifetime, and just grow above that.
Thanks again to Tehilla for the words of wisdom about following our intuition. And thanks to the sponsor of this podcast, Level 10 Life Coach. To learn more about their 15-day digital detox, visit level10lifecoach.com. The biggest thanks goes out to our listeners. Thanks for joining the journey and learning how to be a human being.